14 cases, multiple layers, this iceberg goes deep to expose the FBI for what it truly is. Tip of the iceberg. Cointelpro. Starting off with the tip of the iceberg, a project known as Cointelpro, a shocking revelation of FBI's mass surveillance. A shadowy government agency with the power to manipulate, infiltrate, and even destroy political movements and civil rights groups at will. That's Cointelpro, the FBI's covert operation that ran from 1956 to 1971, led by the notorious J. Edgar Hoover. FBI agents infiltrating meetings, wiretapping phones, and disseminating false information to sow discord among activists. But the reality was even darker. Cointelpro didn't hesitate to resort to extreme measures, collaborating with local police forces to conduct illegal raids and orchestrate assassinations. The psychological warfare employed by the FBI was particularly chilling. Consider Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., whose every move was surveilled and whose personal affairs were exploited in an attempt to discredit him. The FBI even went so far as to send him a threatening letter, insinuating that he should take his own life to avoid public humiliation. But Cointelpro didn't stop at targeting individuals. It also aimed to dismantle entire organizations deemed subversive to the government's interests. From the Communist Party of America to civil rights groups like the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and the Black Panther Party, no one was safe from the FBI's relentless crusade against dissent. One of the most infamous examples of Cointelpro's brutality was the assassination of Chicago Black Panther Party chairman Fred Hampton. In a chilling display of collusion between the FBI and the local law enforcement, Hampton was drugged and executed in his own home. Yet perhaps most disturbingly, while Cointelpro ruthlessly targeted groups fighting for civil rights, it turned a blind eye to white supremacist organizations like the Ku Klux Klan. This blatant hypocrisy underscores the systemic racism that pervaded American society at the time. Thankfully, Cointelpro's reign of terror was brought to light in 1971 when the illegal activities of the FBI were exposed to the public. But the scars it left behind are still felt today, serving as a stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked government power and the importance of remaining vigilant in defense of civil liberties. We do know that the FBI activities under the Cointelpro umbrella were some of the most terrifying and illegal in American history. Groups who were simply exercising their quintessentially American First Amendment rights were attacked, defamed, arrested, and dissolved. The people who formed these groups were at best threatened and manipulated, and at worst, murdered and pressured towards suicide. We wish we could give you a more comforting ending, but instead we'll leave you with two questions. What are the chances that Cointelpro was an isolated incident? And what else have the FBI done that we don't even know about? Unabomber. The Unabomber case is the pinnacle of suspense when the FBI faces off against an almost unbeatable bomb, described by them as the most intricate and one of the largest they've ever encountered. A bomb so complex that its equal has yet to be seen. Can they disarm it? A shadowy figure lurking in the depths of a Montana forest, crafting lethal devices with sinister precision. Theodore Kaczynski, a brilliant but troubled mind, turned his intellect into a weapon against the very society he once belonged to. The Unabomber's reign of terror spanned nearly 2 decades, from 1978 to 1995, leaving a trail of destruction and fear in its wake. His targets? Universities, airlines, and anyone associated with the march of technological progress. His meticulously crafted explosive devices were often sent via mail, targeting universities, airlines, and other institutions. The term Unabomber originated from the FBI code for the case Unabomb, University and Airline Bomber. The Unabomber's attacks resulted in 3 deaths and 23 injuries over the span of nearly 2 decades. The case gained widespread attention due to the bomber's ability to evade capture for so long, despite an extensive manhunt and investigative efforts by the FBI and other law enforcement agencies. Despite the FBI's best efforts, the Unabomber remained elusive, like a ghost haunting the collective psyche of the nation. But every shadow has its cracks, and in 1995, a ray of light pierced through. Theodore Kaczynski's own brother, recognizing eerie echoes of his siblings' thoughts in the Unabomber's manifesto, bravely stepped forward, leading to the arrest that would end the reign of terror. The trial that followed was a spectacle of its own as Kaczynski faced justice for his heinous acts. Pleading guilty to all charges, he spared himself from the death penalty but was condemned to spend the rest of his days behind bars. Robert Hanssen, Espionage Case. Prepare to be shocked by the jaw-dropping tale of Robert Hanssen, the FBI agent who turned out to be the ultimate betrayer. At first glance, he seemed like your average computer nerd, but behind that facade lurked a cunning spy who sold out his country for cold hard cash and diamonds from the Russians. Over a mind-boggling 22 years, Hanssen climbed the ranks at the FBI, all while secretly feeding the Soviets top-secret information, including the existence of a covert surveillance tunnel right under the Russian embassy in Washington, D.C. But his treachery didn't stop there. He also exposed U.S. war plans and blew the cover of American spies working undercover for the U.S. government. But wait, it gets even crazier. Hanssen's double life extended to his personal affairs, where he indulged in voyeurism and published explicit stories about his sex life with his unsuspecting wife on adult websites, all while attending church daily and presenting himself as a devout family man. And if you thought his betrayal couldn't get any worse, think again. Hanssen not only betrayed his country and his family, but also his faith and his closest friends. He even used his spy money to lavish gifts on strippers, attempting to convert them to Catholicism while secretly lusting after them. In February 2001, just a month before he was set to retire from the FBI, Hanssen's world collapsed when evidence of his espionage was uncovered. A Russian spy handed over a KGB file containing a tape recording of Hanssen's voice and his fingerprints, leading to his arrest and eventual guilty plea. Now, as he faces sentencing from espionage, the shocking truth of Hanssen's betrayal leaves us questioning just how deep the darkness can run in the heart of a man sworn to protect his country. Surface level. FBI forensic scandal. In the early 2000s, a profound scandal shook the foundations of the FBI's forensic practices, particularly focusing on hair analysis, and unearthed a disturbing pattern of flawed testimony that led to numerous wrongful convictions.
The FBI's hair comparison unit routinely gave flawed forensic testimony that favored prosecutors,
revealing that for years, agents had been providing misleading and scientifically invalid testimony in hundreds of criminal cases. At the center of this controversy was the practice of microscopic hair comparison analysis, where FBI experts claimed to match hairs found at crime scenes to those of suspects with unwarranted certainty. Further investigation into the matter unveiled the alarming reality that these forensic experts had overstated the significance of hair evidence, often attributing a level of certainty to their conclusions that was not supported by scientific evidence. This erroneous testimony, presented as irrefutable proof of guilt, had led to the wrongful conviction of innocent individuals across the country. Now hold on to your seats, because this isn't just some small-time mess-up. We're talking about cases where 32 people were sentenced to death. And guess what? 14 of them have already been executed or died in prison. While these FBI errors don't automatically mean the defendants were innocent, it's still a huge deal. That's why defendants and prosecutors from nearly every corner of the country are getting a wake-up call to see if they've got grounds for a second shot at justice. In the aftermath of the scandal, efforts were made to address the shortcomings in forensic science, including the implementation of new protocols and procedures to improve the validity and reliability of forensic analysis. However, the fact remains that the one agency people would have trusted to uphold justice is doing the exact opposite and handing out false sentences left and right. Gregory Scarpa and the FBI. He was a notorious gangster known as the Grim Reaper, feared and respected in the underworld of New York City and beyond. His reputation as a ruthless enforcer and a top earner for the mob preceded him, striking fear into the hearts of those who crossed him. Despite law enforcement's efforts, he always managed to stay ahead. However, beneath his tough exterior lurked a dark secret, one so grave that its revelation would spell certain death at the hands of the mafia: the fact that he worked hand in hand with the FBI. That's right, a gang leader was one of FBI's top informants. Scarpa, also known as the Grim Reaper, was deeply entrenched in the underworld, involved in various criminal activities such as illegal gambling, loan sharking, extortion, hijacking, narcotics, and murder. Under the mentorship of Charlie the Siege Losicero, Scarpa quickly climbed the ranks to become a captain in his own crew by the early 1960s. However, Scarpa's fortunes took a turn when he was apprehended for armed robbery. In a bid to evade a lengthy prison sentence, Scarpa struck a deal with the FBI to become an informant, thus marking the beginning of a 30-year relationship with the Bureau. During the tumultuous 1960s, the United States was embroiled in civil rights turmoil. In a chilling episode during the summer of 1964, 3 civil rights activists mysteriously vanished in the South, their fate presumed to be grim. As public outcry mounted, the FBI, facing intense pressure, turned to Scarpa to unearth the truth. With relentless determination, Scarpa and a fellow FBI agent apprehended a Klansman suspected of involvement, resorting to coercive measures to extract vital information. Through his ruthless methods, Scarpa succeeded in uncovering the buried bodies, shedding light on a heinous crime. In a shocking turn of events in 1980, FBI agent Lindley DeVecchio forced an alliance with Scarpa, reigniting their partnership with the Bureau. Scarpa, allegedly wielding his influence and offering material bribes, supplied DeVecchio with dubious intelligence on the Colombos. In return, DeVecchio shielded Scarpa from legal repercussions and furnished him with critical information during the intense conflict of the Third Colombo War. Despite his role as a confidential informant, Scarpa's hands remained stained with blood. Unabated by his collaboration with the FBI, Scarpa continued his murderous spree. Employing his trademark method of theatrically brandishing a handkerchief before swiftly dispatching his victims, Scarpa exploited the mob's ruthless code to its fullest extent. In a chilling demonstration of loyalty to the underworld, Scarpa executed a fellow mobster who accused him of being a rat without substantiated proof. This one act removed all doubts from anyone's mind about Scarpa being a rat and allowed him to benefit from his relationship with the FBI without any of his fellow mobsters knowing. Gregory Scarpa met a demise as shocking as his criminal exploits. In 1994, Scarpa's reign of terror came to a dramatic halt, not from a rival's bullet, but from complications of AIDS. The revelation stunned many as Scarpa's deathbed confession unveiled a dark secret lurking beneath his fearsome facade. Scarpa's relationship with the FBI, once cloaked in secrecy and mutual benefit, unraveled in a web of suspicion and betrayal. With Scarpa's demise, the chilling saga of the Grim Reaper reached its climax, leaving behind a legacy tainted with bloodshed, treachery, and the unsettling revelation of how the FBI once conspired with a deadly mobster and let him go unchecked for years as he continued his killing sprees and reign of terror. Really does dampen your trust in the FBI, doesn't it? Middle level. Whitey Bulger case. The FBI's collaboration with mobsters and gangsters doesn't end here. As we dive deeper into the surface level of the shocking FBI iceberg, we unveil more dark secrets the agency has harbored and kept hidden. But before we unveil more of FBI's affiliation with dangerous entities, make sure to hit that subscribe button to continue watching more icebergs that'll shock you to your core. The case of James Whitey Bulger is a harrowing tale of crime, corruption, and betrayal that shook the foundations of law enforcement in Boston. Known as the infamous Boston mobster, Bulger's reign of terror spanned decades, leaving behind a trail of bloodshed and fear. Born into a South Boston neighborhood in 1929, Bulger rose through the ranks of organized crime, establishing himself as a ruthless and feared figure in the criminal underworld. His criminal empire, built on extortion, drug trafficking, and murder, cast a shadow over Boston for years. However, what set Bulger apart was his clandestine relationship with the FBI. In exchange for providing information about rival gangs and criminal activities, Bulger received protection and immunity from prosecution. This unholy alliance allowed Bulger to operate with impunity, evading law enforcement while continuing his reign of terror. The depths of Bulger's collaboration with the FBI were shocking. Not only did he receive protection, but he also used his status as an informant to eliminate rivals and silence witnesses, further cementing his grip on the criminal underworld. For years, law enforcement turned a blind eye to Bulger's crimes, turning a dangerous blind eye to the atrocities he committed. However, the facade of collaboration shattered in the late 1990s when Bulger was indicted on charges ranging from racketeering to murder. The subsequent trial laid bare the extent of Bulger's crimes and the complicity of law enforcement in allowing him to continue unchecked. It exposed the deep-rooted corruption within the FBI and raised serious questions about the ethics of making deals with dangerous criminals. In the end, Bulger's legacy is one of bloodshed, betrayal, and a chilling reminder of the dangers of corruption within law enforcement. This is just one time the FBI got exposed for partnering with criminals. Think of how many times more the organization must have done this without us knowing. The Larry Nassar case. In a tale that shocks the conscience, over 90 women who endured the unthinkable horrors of sexual abuse at the hands of Lawrence G. Nassar, the disgraced former doctor for USA Gymnastics, have turned their wrath towards the very institution meant to protect them, the FBI. These brave survivors have filed lawsuits against the FBI for its massive failure to investigate Nassar's crimes, despite receiving credible information about his depraved acts. The saga of negligence and betrayal began in 2015 when reports of Nassar's heinous abuses first reached FBI agents' ears. Shockingly, instead of swiftly launching a comprehensive investigation to bring Nassar to justice, the FBI chose to look the other way. This monumental failure allowed Nassar to continue his reign of terror, assaulting more than 70 girls and women over a year before authorities finally apprehended him. As the years passed, Nassar's reign of terror persisted unabated, shattering the lives of countless young athletes who had placed their trust in him. Despite mounting evidence and numerous victims bravely coming forward to share their stories, the FBI remained lethargic and indifferent, callously disregarding the cries for justice echoing in the darkness. Adding insult to injury, the Justice Department's decision not to prosecute two former FBI agents accused of bungling the investigation only deepened the wounds of the victims. The plaintiffs in these lawsuits include Olympic gymnastics icons Simone Biles, Ali Raisman, and Michaela Maroney, along with other courageous survivors like Maggie Nichols and Samantha Roy. Their collective claims for damages exceed a staggering $1 billion, reflecting the immeasurable pain and suffering inflicted upon them by Nassar's vile actions and the FBI's callous indifference. Nassar's despicable crimes were known to the FBI as early as 2015. Despite detailed testimonies from brave survivors like Maroney and Nichols, the FBI chose to remain passive, failing to escalate the investigation or intervene to stop Nassar's atrocities. The FBI's obvious mishandling of the Nassar case was compounded by its failure to notify local law enforcement about the accusations against Nassar, as revealed by the Justice Department's Inspector General. The report highlighted false statements made by FBI officials who were accused of minimizing errors and misleading investigators. Langeman, who interviewed Maroney 2 months after learning of Nassar's actions, was fired for his mishandling of the case. His delayed report contained false statements and inaccuracies, further betraying the trust of the survivors. Maroney's heart-wrenching testimony to Congress exposed the FBI's callous treatment of her ordeal.
They chose to lie about what I said and protect a serial child molester rather than protect not only me, but countless others.
The survivors, once failed by the very institutions meant to protect them, now seek justice through the legal process, determined to hold accountable those responsible for their suffering. Ruby Ridge Incident. In the sweltering August heat of 1992, tensions reached a boiling point in the rugged wilderness of Ruby Ridge, Idaho. Randy Weaver, a former Green Beret, found himself at the center of a deadly standoff with federal authorities. Surrounded by heavily armed ATF, U.S. Marshals, and FBI agents, Weaver and his family were thrust into a nightmarish ordeal that would forever alter their lives. The standoff began with a tragic misunderstanding. A missed court date, the result of a clerical error, escalated into a full-blown siege when federal agents descended upon the Weavers' remote cabin. Shots rang out, claiming the lives of Weaver's young son Sam and a U.S. Marshal, igniting a powder keg of violence that would consume Ruby Ridge. As the standoff dragged on, the Weaver family hunkered down inside their cabin, cut off from the outside world. With no phone to communicate and no television to glean information, they were left in the dark about the true intentions of the federal agents surrounding them. Meanwhile, negotiators attempted to defuse the situation, but their efforts were hampered by miscommunication and mistrust on both sides. Outside, the scene resembled a military operation. Federal agents, armed with rifles and clad in tactical gear, formed a perimeter around the cabin, while snipers took up positions in the surrounding hills. The air crackled with tension as the standoff stretched into its 10th day, with no end in sight. Amidst the chaos, tragedy struck again. Vicky Weaver, holding her infant daughter, stepped out of the cabin and was fatally shot by an FBI sniper, a senseless loss that shocked even the seasoned agents on the ground. The death of Vicky Weaver only fueled the anger and desperation inside the cabin as Randy Weaver and his family braced for the worst. It wasn't until a former Green Beret, James Gritz, volunteered to enter the cabin and negotiate on Weaver's behalf that the standoff finally came to a close. After tense negotiations, Weaver and his friend Kevin Harris surrendered to authorities, bringing an end to the bloody confrontation. The Ruby Ridge standoff remains a dark chapter in American history, a stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked government power and the devastating consequences of an organization designed to protect its citizens working against them and taking innocent lives. As the dust settled and the nation grappled with the aftermath, one thing was clear: the scars left by Ruby Ridge would never fully heal, while the FBI still remains unaccountable. Deeper middle level. Waco Siege. Are you still with us? Prepare to go a level deeper into the iceberg as cases get more intense, stark, and shocking, starting off with the tragic Waco Siege. In a gripping saga that captivated the nation, the Waco Siege of 1993 unfolded like a modern-day tragedy, pitting the federal government against a religious sect led by the enigmatic figure David Koresh. Nestled in central Texas, the Mount Carmel compound became the epicenter of a deadly confrontation between law enforcement and the Branch Davidians, a group with beliefs steeped in apocalyptic prophecy. Founded by Victor Houteff in the 1930s, the Branch Davidians, an offshoot of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, fervently awaited the second coming of Jesus Christ and prepared for the impending Judgment Day. But under the charismatic leadership of David Koresh, the group took a radical turn, embracing polygamy and stockpiling weapons for what they believed was the imminent end of the world. Word eventually reached federal authorities that the cult was illegally stockpiling weapons. On February 28, 1993, agents from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco and Firearms, or ATF, arrived at the Mount Carmel compound armed with search warrants for the property and an arrest warrant for Koresh. Gunfire erupted, though it's unclear which side started it. At the end of the 2-hour standoff, 4 ATF agents and 6 Branch Davidians were dead. The FBI intervened and nearly 900 members of law enforcement descended on the compound, including Texas Rangers, Army personnel, and National Guardsmen. For weeks, FBI negotiators bargained with Koresh, bringing in supplies and allowing him to sermonize on the radio in a bid to get him to surrender. Though he allowed a number of Davidians to leave, Koresh displayed no signs of turning himself in. Agents then tried hardball tactics, turning off the electricity, blasting loud music and flashing harsh spotlights into the compound's windows. After a 51-day standoff, Attorney General Janet Reno gave the FBI the green light to raid Mount Carmel. Finally, on April 19, 1993, Attorney General Janet Reno authorized a raid on Mount Carmel. Tanks breached the compound walls, unleashing tear gas in an attempt to force the Branch Davidians out. But tragedy struck when a fire erupted, engulfing the compound in flames and claiming the lives of around 80 members, including Koresh and innocent children. The aftermath of Waco sparked intense debate and scrutiny, with many questioning the government's heavy-handed tactics. Allegations of federal misconduct and cover-ups swirled, fueling conspiracy theories and igniting further distrust in authorities. For some, like Timothy McVeigh, the Waco Siege served as a catalyst for violent retaliation, culminating in the Oklahoma City bombing 2 years later. Decades later, the legacy of Waco endures as a stark reminder of the perils of extremism, government overreach, and the devastating consequences of unchecked power. Had the FBI not retaliated with such extreme force, perhaps many lives would not have been unnecessarily lost. The Oklahoma bombing. The aftermaths of the Waco Siege would soon follow America and the FBI in a way unimaginable: the Oklahoma bombing. In retaliation to the FBI's actions at the Waco Siege, this devastating bombing was carried out, which took the lives of hundreds of innocent people. Continue watching to find out. The bombing, which occurred on April 19, 1995, ripped through the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in downtown Oklahoma City with a force so catastrophic that it left an indelible mark on the nation's psyche. The explosion, triggered by a powerful truck bomb parked in front of the building, unleashed a wave of destruction, tearing apart the structure and claiming the lives of 168 innocent people. Among the victims were men, women, and children, federal employees, visitors, and children in the building's daycare center, who were going about their daily lives unaware of the tragedy that awaited them. The sheer magnitude of the devastation was staggering, as the blast shattered windows, reduced offices to rubble, and sent shockwaves reverberating throughout the city. The Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building, once a symbol of government service and civic duty, stood as a haunting reminder of the senseless loss of life and the fragility of security in the face of extremism. As rescue workers sifted through the debris searching for survivors amid the chaos and destruction, the true scale of the tragedy became painfully clear. The Oklahoma City bombing was not just an act of terror, it was an act of unspeakable cruelty that shattered families, shattered communities, and shattered the nation's sense of security. In the days and weeks that followed, the nation mourned the loss of those who perished in the bombing, grappling with feelings of grief, anger, and disbelief. The Oklahoma City bombing was a wake-up call for America, forcing the country to confront the harsh reality of domestic terrorism and the urgent need for greater vigilance in safeguarding against such atrocities. In the aftermath of the devastating Oklahoma City bombing, the FBI swiftly mobilized a massive investigation to untangle the complexities of one of the deadliest terrorist attacks in American history. As the FBI launched its investigation into the bombing, the search for answers intensified, with agents working tirelessly to identify and apprehend those responsible for the heinous attack. The arrest of Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols, the masterminds behind the bombing plot, provided a measure of closure to a grieving nation, but it also raised troubling questions about the failures of law enforcement and the missed opportunities to prevent such a tragedy from occurring. As investigators delved deeper into McVeigh's background, a chilling pattern emerged. His anger towards the government, fueled by events such as the infamous raid on the Branch Davidian compound in Waco, Texas, hinted at a motive for the bombing. The date of the bombing, April 19th, held particular significance, marking the anniversary of the Waco Siege. The Oklahoma City bombing was a dark chapter in American history, a stark reminder of the destructive power of hate and extremism. Yet in the face of unimaginable loss and devastation, the resilience of the human spirit prevailed as communities came together to rebuild and remember those who were lost. As the nation reflects on the events of that fateful day, we are reminded of the importance of unity, compassion, and unwavering resolve in the face of adversity. Anthrax attacks. The anthrax attacks of 2001 sent shockwaves across America, instilling fear and uncertainty in a nation already reeling from the aftermath of the 9/11 terrorist attacks. In the wake of these deadly assaults, a series of anthrax-laced letters were mailed to media outlets and government offices, leaving a trail of devastation in their wake. The letters, containing a highly potent strain of anthrax spores, resulted in 5 deaths and numerous injuries, further deepening the sense of vulnerability felt by the American public. As the nation grappled with the aftermath of the attacks, the FBI launched a comprehensive investigation to identify the perpetrators and bring them to justice. However, from the outset, the investigation was marred by missteps and mishandling, casting doubt on the Bureau's ability to effectively handle such a complex case. One of the most glaring missteps in the FBI's investigation was the premature focus on scientist Bruce Ivans as the primary suspect. Ivans, a respected microbiologist who worked at the United States Army Medical Research Institute of Infectious Diseases, came under intense scrutiny from federal investigators. Despite lacking concrete evidence linking him to the attacks, Ivans found himself thrust into the spotlight as the FBI's prime suspect. The relentless pressure of being implicated in the anthrax attacks took a toll on Ivans, who vehemently denied any involvement in the crimes. However, as the investigation intensified and the media scrutiny intensified, Ivan's mental health began to deteriorate rapidly. Eventually, facing mounting accusations and the prospect of criminal charges, Ivan succumbed to the overwhelming pressure and took his own life in 2008, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and unresolved suspicions. In addition to the wrongful accusation of Bruce Ivans, the FBI's handling of the case was further called into question due to the destruction of crucial evidence. As investigators pursued leads and gathered information, key pieces of evidence were either mishandled or destroyed, undermining the integrity of the investigation and hindering efforts to uncover the truth behind the Anthrax attacks. The mishandling of the Anthrax attacks investigation sparked widespread criticism and raised serious concerns about the thoroughness and competence of the FBI's investigative practices. Many questioned whether the Bureau's rush to find a suspect and close the case had compromised the pursuit of justice and prevented the true perpetrators from being held accountable for their actions. In the years since the Anthrax attacks, the FBI's handling of the case has continued to be scrutinized, with lingering doubts and unanswered questions casting a shadow over one of the most notorious incidents of bioterrorism in American history. As the nation grapples with the enduring legacy of the Anthrax attacks, the lessons learned from this dark chapter serve as a sobering reminder of the importance of diligence, integrity, and transparency in the pursuit of justice. Bottom level. The Viola Liuzzo murder. That's it, folks. We're at the bottom of the iceberg now, where the FBI harbors some of its deepest and darkest. Make sure to watch till the end. You are truly in for a surprise. The murder of Viola Liuzzo in 1965 stands as one of the most notorious incidents of racial violence during the civil rights movement. A white civil rights worker, Liuzzo was tragically gunned down by Ku Klux Klansmen in Alabama. The circumstances surrounding her death revealed a disturbing connection to the FBI, adding another layer of complexity to the case. On that fateful day, Klansmen noticed Liuzzo driving with a young black man, Leroy Moten, and gave chase. Shots were fired into her car, ultimately claiming her life. Shockingly, one of the Klansmen involved was Gary Thomas Rowe, an FBI informant whose presence raised troubling questions about the Bureau's involvement. Within 24 hours of Liuzzo's assassination by the Ku Klux Klan and the FBI's informant Gary Thomas Rowe, J. Edgar Hoover began a smear campaign to the press to subordinate FBI agents and to select politicians, falsely insinuating that Liuzzo was involved in illicit drug use and interracial relationships. Hoover claimed that marks on her arm were evidence of recent drug injections and attempted to cast aspersions on her character by suggesting she was engaged in inappropriate behavior with a black man. While attempting to obscure the fact that an FBI informant was in the car and to ensure that the FBI was not held responsible for permitting their informant to participate in violent acts without surveillance or backup, the FBI was concerned that they might be held accountable for their informant, Rowe's, role in the death. Rowe had been an informant for the FBI since 1960 and had a history of involvement in violent activities during Ku Klux Klan activities. Despite being aware of Rowe's violent tendencies, the FBI failed to take appropriate action to prevent his participation in such activities. Autopsy testing in 1965 showed no traces of drugs in Liuzzo's system, dispelling the FBI's false claims. Additionally, it was revealed that Liuzzo had not engaged in recent sexual activity at the time of her death. The FBI's role in the smear campaign was uncovered in 1978 when Liuzzo's children obtained case documents from the FBI under the Freedom of Information Act, shedding light on the agency's complicity in defaming her character. The revelation of the FBI's role in spreading false and defamatory information about Liuzzo added fuel to the fire of public outrage. The tragic death of Viola Liuzzo not only exposed the depths of racial hatred, but also revealed the disturbing collusion between law enforcement and white supremacist groups during this tumultuous period in American history. Florida school shooting. The Florida school shooting at Stoneman Douglas High School on February 14, 2018 stands as one of the deadliest and most harrowing incidents in American history. The rampage, carried out by Nicholas Cruz, unleashed unspeakable horror within the halls of the school, leaving a trail of devastation in its wake. In the span of just a few minutes, crews unleashed a hail of gunfire, indiscriminately targeting students and faculty alike. The sheer scale of the violence was staggering. When the shooting finally ceased, it had claimed the lives of 17 innocent individuals. 17 promising futures extinguished in an instant, their families left shattered and communities plunged into mourning. But the toll of the shooting extended far beyond those who lost their lives. Scores of others were left grievously wounded, their bodies bearing the physical and emotional scars of the ordeal. The injuries sustained ranged from gunshot wounds to shattered bones, leaving survivors grappling with the profound trauma of their experiences. The Florida school shooting wasn't just another act of violence, it was a stark reminder of the lethal consequences of unchecked gun violence and the urgent need for comprehensive reform. The brutality of the attack laid bare the stark reality that no community is immune to the horrors of mass shootings. However, what's more shocking is that the FBI knew the shooting was going to happen, yet did nothing to protect its citizens from the upcoming horror. Just makes us think whether the organization truly cares about the citizens it's supposed to protect or not. As the nation recoiled in horror at the senseless loss of life, questions swirled about how such a tragedy could have been allowed to occur. Amidst the anguish and grief, attention turned to the failure of the FBI to act on critical information that could have potentially prevented the massacre. The revelation of this oversight only added to the profound sense of outrage and disbelief in the aftermath of the shooting. About 6 weeks prior to the fateful day, an alarming call to the FBI's tip line sent shockwaves through the agency. The caller, deeply concerned about former Stoneman Douglas student Nicholas Cruz, relayed chilling details. Cruz had purchased firearms and expressed a chilling intent to slip into a school and start shooting the place up. The urgency of the warning was unmistakable as the caller ominously declared, "I know he's going to explode." Yet despite the gravity of the information, the crucial tip never reached the desks of FBI agents in South Florida, and no action was taken to intercept Cruz before tragedy struck. The failure to act wasn't an isolated incident. Months earlier, a disturbing comment left on a YouTube video sent shockwaves through the online community. Under the username Nicholas Cruz, a sinister proclamation was made: "I would become a professional school shooter." The gravity of these words should have sparked immediate intervention, yet they fell into the abyss of bureaucratic negligence. In the wake of the shooting's aftermath, the FBI's admission of its failure to follow up on these glaring warning signs only compounded the sense of disbelief and outrage. The revelation that both the tip-line call and the YouTube comment were disregarded cast a stark spotlight on systemic flaws within the agency's protocols for identifying and addressing threats. The Stoneman Douglas High School shooting wasn't just a tragedy, it was a wake-up call. It forced the nation to confront uncomfortable truths about the prevalence of gun violence and the need for meaningful change. Not only that, it rang out the FBI's inefficiencies and carelessness for the entire world to see. Murder of Martin Luther King.
For all of our fellow citizens and people who love peace all over the world. And that is that Martin Luther King was shot and was killed tonight in Memphis.
November 1964 marked a dark chapter in American history as the FBI, frustrated by their unsuccessful attempts to discredit civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr., resorted to a sinister plot. The Bureau prepared to send Dr. King an anonymous package, ominously dubbed the Poison Pen Letter, containing a disturbing document intended to tarnish his reputation and threaten his life. FBI Intelligence Chief Bill Sullivan himself took on the task, using plain, unmarked paper to craft a menacing letter addressed simply to King. In the letter, Dr. King was labeled a fraud, with a chilling warning of his imminent downfall among the public. Accompanying the letter was an audio tape purportedly compiled from FBI surveillance, alleging King's involvement in extramarital affairs. The most chilling aspect of the package was its ominous closing, hinting at a deadline for Dr. King to take his own life or face the humiliating release of the compromising tape. Scholars later interpreted this as a veiled directive for King to commit suicide, highlighting the malicious intent behind the FBI's actions. Sent anonymously to Dr. King on November 21, 1964, the package remained unopened for over a month as King was away in Oslo, Norway, accepting the Nobel Prize. It wasn't until after Christmas that Coretta Scott King, his wife, bravely opened the threatening package, discovering the harrowing contents within. Upon listening to the tape and reading the letter, Dr. King and his associates had no doubt that this was the work of the FBI. Plunged into a deep depression by the revelation, King's emotional turmoil was compounded by the knowledge that the FBI was monitoring his every move, including the impact of their threatening package. Despite the FBI's belief that their intimidation tactics would silence Dr. King, they soon realized their grave mistake. In March of 1965, Dr. King spearheaded one of the civil rights movement's most iconic demonstrations in Selma, Alabama. Organizing a series of marches to demand federal protection for black citizens' voting rights, Dr. King displayed unwavering courage and resilience in the face of adversity. The culmination of these efforts came 5 months later when President Lyndon Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act of 1965 into law, a monumental victory for the civil rights movement. Despite the FBI's relentless efforts to discredit and neutralize Dr. King, his commitment to non-violent protest prevailed, leading to tangible progress in the fight for equality. By 1966, the FBI's obsession with Dr. King's private life had waned, and their attempts to undermine him had faltered. As Dr. King continued his tireless advocacy for justice and equality, it became evident that Hoover and the FBI's efforts to derail his movement had ultimately failed, and their investigation into his personal life came to a standstill. However, it still doesn't fail to send chills down your spine when you think of just how far the FBI would go to pursue their evil and relentless goals against the public. As we finish our journey into the FBI's dark realm of controversies, keep in mind, reality has taken an unexpected turn, and the truth surpasses even the most astonishing fiction. We've only begun to uncover the mysteries, but the most captivating revelations await. Stay inquisitive, stay alert, for you never know when you might turn out to be the FBI's next victim.